Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you once again to a burst of inspiration. Tonight's learning is dedicated for a refuah shalema. It is a merit for those that are unwell in our community. Sadly, like so many communities, we have a number of members that are now hospitalized, struggling with their breathing, and we wish them a refuah shalema amongst all the others that have COVID and are trying to recover. So delighted to see everyone joining us this evening, those that are live, those that are going to play catch up. And there is no bigger parsha, I don't think, no bigger Torah portion than Parsha Shemos. This is where it really all begins. This is where the seeds of the future of the Jewish people are sowed. And this is where the greatest of our leaders, Moshe Rabbeinu, comes onto the scene. So let us just in the few minutes that we have, and remember it's meant to be a burst of inspiration, meaning that we keep it short and sweet. I want to share a few beautiful, joyous pieces to take into Shabbos. Lovely to see everyone. Let us start and see how much we can cram in a few minutes. So the story you're all familiar with, it's the same story as last year, hasn't changed. What's the story? It's the story of the Jewish people. So we know, as we mentioned already from the time of Jacob, that the story of our people repeats itself in every generation. There have been those that have tried to plot and to scheme, to overcome and to subjugate and to destroy the Jewish people. And eventually, Vatzilenu Hashem Miyadam, that the Almighty saved us from their hands. So this week we learn about the first of the four exiles that already was prophesied and seen in a vision by Jacob in the time of the ladder going up to heaven. We know that initially things were very good. It's the story of our people. We arrive in a country, we become integrated, we contribute, we become affluent, and all of a sudden, everyone who sees us climbing up the ladder of prosperity turn around and they say, how did they get up there? And they shake that ladder and we come tumbling down. That's exactly what happened here. All of a sudden, the Mitzrayim looked at what had happened, and Yosef, they forgot about the fact that he had done so much good for the Egyptian people and society, saving them from the famine, and therefore they became threatened by the Jews, and they decided to gradually come up with a plan to, I guess, to scheme the first genocide plan in humanity. And the idea was that all the Jewish male children would be thrown into the River Nile, and eventually they were so living in fear and trepidation of the Jewish people and of the savior of the Jewish people, that even the Egyptians' children were thrown in along on the very date when they prophesied, the astronomers saw in the stars that the Jewish savior was going to be born. Why did the astronomers get confused and they weren't sure whether it was an Egyptian or a Jew, which is why they threw the Egyptian male children along with the Jewish male children? And that is because Moshe, of course, had this dual existence. We're going to come back to it a bit later on. On the one hand, he was born from a Jewish mother, but where did he grow up? He grew up in the lap of luxury in an Egyptian palace as the Egyptian prince. So let's come back to that in a minute. But that is why the astronomers, what they saw in the stars was in fact true. They saw that that the savior was going to be born for the Jewish people, the eventual leader of the Jewish people, and they weren't sure, is it on the Egyptian side, on the Jewish side? Bear that thought in mind, put it on hold, and we'll come back to it. So Moshe is born, and like all the other Jewish children, he has to be placed in the River Nile. It's placed in a basket, floats down the River Nile, and eventually is picked up by no less than the Princess of Egypt. I'm not quite sure, every time I sit down in front of this computer, it tells me that my battery is running low. Let's see if I can find the right wire. Yes, I can. Apologies for this. But if we don't charge it now, we will not have any juice. So Moshe is floating down the river Nile, and the daughter of Pharaoh sees him, and honestly, she decides she's not sure. Jewish child, not Jewish child. She reaches out and she stretches out her hand. And it's interesting that in the normal run of the mill things, it would have been impossible for her to stretch out her hand. She hears the baby crying and she stretches out her hand. And the question is, what was the point? Why should she even attempt to reach this basket if it was beyond arm's length? And the answer is because when you hear the voice of a baby crying, when you hear the cry of a Jewish child, we should all want to stretch out. It doesn't make sense. It's very often that we see things. You can see a car crash, somebody falling over on a bike, whatever it is. You automatically, if you've got an neshama, if you've got any sensitivity, you reach out. You want to do something, even though it may not be physically possible. She did everything she could. And when the Almighty saw that she was doing everything that she could in reaching out, he miraculously stretched her hand, elongated her hand so she could reach the basket. And Moshe is in this basket and she hears the baby crying. But what's interesting is she discovers it's a child, it's a baby, right? And yet, when it comes to the crying of the child, we're told that the lad is crying. The word nar, lad, that is not a baby. It's a more mature individual that has an awareness about other people. And therefore, the point being that Moshe was crying, not so much for himself, but our sages expound that Moshe's cries were for the pain and suffering of his people. Already then, Moshe apparently felt for the pain of others. We're told that Moshe grew up. Now, how many times can you grow up? Yeah, how many times can you grow up? We're already told in the earlier verses that Moshe, that the child grew. Now we're told again that he grew. Okay, at a growing spurt, is that really what the Torah comes to tell us? Do I need to be told that? The answer is no. The commentators point out a beautiful, beautiful idea. And for this alone, it's worth tuning in. Vayigdal Moshe. How did Moshe grow? What does it mean by Moshe grew? What's the connotation in this sense, the second time it's mentioned? Vayetze elechav. You know, when you really mature and grow, when you go out to your brothers and sisters, when you think about another person, when it's not all about me, which is what we've been hearing all about from one certain individual, supposed leader of the free world, when it's about other people, when you're thinking, you're altruistic, you're selfless, that is when you are a true leader. That's when Vayigdal Moshe had grown and matured and had become a leader. So he goes out to his brothers, he sees their suffering, he feels their pain, feels the anguish, and then by Yipan he sees that there is an Egyptian that is smiting a Jewish man, right? And he's smiting the Jewish man. Moshe sees that this Jewish man, if he allows things to continue, he's going to be killed. So what's Moshe's response? Moshe looks this way and that way, sees there is no one, and he smites with the Shem Mefurish, the name of God, the ineffable name. He destroys and kills the Egyptian on the spot. It's very perplexing. What does it mean? That Moshe looked this way and that way. So, simply speaking, and here's where we see the depth and the layers in the Torah. It means that Moshe physically looked around to make sure no one was going to catch him out. But on a deeper level, they say prophetically that Moshe looked to see if this man, if anyone was going to come out, would he be worthy of being kept alive because of the eventual descendants, the worthy descendants that he would have. Maybe he had some worthy descendants that would make it worthwhile to keep him alive, and therefore Moshe would not be able to kill him, and he would have to find a different way to save the Jewish man. And Moshe sees there isn't anyone, and then he kills him. That's the second level of explanation. If we can go one level deeper, I'd like to share with you an explanation, and it is an exposition. It is a drush that Rabbi Isaac Bernstein the late great Rabbi Bernstein of Kinloss fame, shared in the name of an Alter Yid, an Alter Yekker. And he said as follows: where did Moshe look? We mentioned earlier at the start of the shir, I set you up for this, I laid the foundations, when I said that Moshe, the astronomers weren't sure when Moshe was born, if it was an Egyptian that was born or it was a Jew that was going to be born as the savior of the Jewish people. And therefore they threw into the Nile both the Egyptians and the Jewish male children. Now, what's interesting is that Moshe has been brought up in an Egyptian home, and yet he knows his nursing mother was his own mother. He knew that he was Jewish, right? But Moshe has these two dimensions to his life: Egyptian and being an Ivri, being a Hebrew. Moshe now feels conflicted between these two aspects of him, of his self, the Egyptian and the Jew. He sees an Egyptian smiting a Jew. And he realizes that you can't carry on living a life with a dual existence, living a life as a schizophrenic. That's not the way a person can be. And at that moment, according to this explanation, looking this way and that way means he didn't look externally. He didn't look into the future. It means he looked internally. He looked inside himself at who he truly was. Who am I, said Moshe. Who do I really want to be? Let me discover who I am. And Moshe discovered that the real Moshe was a Jew. And at that point, having looked this way and that way in himself and discovered this conflict within himself, by Yaches HaMitzri, he smoked the Egyptian aspect of himself. He smoked that. He decided to leave behind any remnants of the Egyptian heritage, identity that he had. And from now on, he affirmed his loyalty to the Jewish people. It's a beautiful, beautiful explanation. I don't want to keep you many minutes more, but there is so much more to say. But let me just share with you just a couple of points. Firstly, about the burning bush. We can't go away from this week. Excuse me, lovely to see you, Stan, Carol, Estelle, and others, without mentioning about the burning bush. The snare. Vasneh einenu ukal. The burning bush that was not consumed. You know the old joke? Can we say the joke? You've heard it before. George W. Bush is standing George W. Bush is standing. No, sorry. Moshe Rabbeinu is standing in Ben Gurion Airport. And he's standing with his long beard. And all of a sudden, George W. Bush comes up to him and says to him, "Is that you, Moshe? Is that really you? You're Moses? Wow, I've already wanted to meet you." Silence. Moses doesn't say a word. Again, George W. Bush says, "Do you know who I am? I'm the president of the United States. You're Moses. I've always waited. I'm a great leader. I wanted to meet the greatest leader of all time." Not a word. After 3 times, George W. Bush says, "What did I do to you? Why won't you speak to me?" So Moshe says to him in Ben Gurion Airport, "Do you know what happened the last time I spoke to a bush?" Okay, it's only a joke. Apologies. Okay, so the bush is not consumed. What is the symbolism of this? It's twofold, at least twofold. One is the idea that the bush that is not consumed is a symbol, represents the Jewish people, that no matter what the fires, no matter what the enemy, no matter what the struggles that we have in life, that the bush, hasne enenu ukal, the bush will never ever be destroyed. And therefore Moshe was being instructed and fortified before his tremendously challenging adventure of trying to go to Pharaoh and ask him permission to let the Jewish people go. So the point being, it doesn't matter what Pharaoh says, the Jewish people will survive, they will thrive, and eventually they will go. And you can see, like this bush will not be destroyed, the Jewish people will never be destroyed. That was the first explanation. And the other one is, of course, that the thorns that were in the bush represent the suffering of the Jewish people, and the bush represented God that was in there. And therefore, the fact that the bush was not devoured, despite the suffering, despite the flames that are surrounding it, was to symbolize that God was with us in Egypt. God is with us whatever we go through. Okay, there's an inextricable bond between us and God, and therefore wherever we are, God is with us and will carry us through whatever we are going through. That is the second idea. So either it represents the Jewish people or it represents the fact that God is with us in suffering. Two beautiful ideas. There's much more to say about that. One final thought before we end off, and that is, if ever you are looking for an excuse as to why you should not take on any responsibility, the excuse book is right here in the Torah. Every excuse Moshe seems to offer God when he's offered the greatest opportunity in life to be a leader of the Jewish people. What's Moshe's response? I can't do it. You want me to lead the Jewish people? This is God asking. And Moshe's response is, I can't possibly do it. Aaron's your man. Aaron's the firstborn. Aaron's a great speaker. Take Aaron. Right? So on the one hand, he's saying there's somebody better than me. Then God says, no. Aaron's got his place. He's going to be the high priest. But I want you, Moshe, you are to be the Jewish leader. No, I can't go. You're asking me to go to speak to Pharaoh? You don't understand. I don't speak well. I can't speak. I'm Aral Safatayim. I've got a stutter. I couldn't possibly do it. Moshe now, rather than saying there's somebody better than him, he's saying that he doesn't have the necessary qualities that are required for the task at hand. What happens? God says three words, and Moshe is convinced. Moshe buys into it, hook, line, and sinker. Anochi Yemach, I will be with you. God doesn't say to Moshe that I'm going to make a miracle, your stutter's going to go, I'm going to make you into the greatest speaker that has ever lived, you're going to be a Churchill, a Barack Obama, a Thatcher, you're going to be the best speaker that ever lived, I'm going to make you a charismatic leader, I'm going to make you the greatest magician. God doesn't say that. God says one thing, you're not going to change, but you don't need to change because I am with you. And as long as you do what you are supposed to do and you give your all, leave the rest to me. It is such, friends, it is the most powerful, potent message we could possibly hear in our lives. To know on the one hand, when we have opportunities, when opportunity knocks and people ask us to do things, somebody asked for advice from me about doing something, they've been invited for a certain great opportunity, and they weren't sure whether they were capable or not. I said, the fact that this opportunity has come to you, it means that it must be that you are capable. There's nothing you've suggested to say that otherwise. But you should know that it's not really all up to you. You are expected to give your all. And whether you are successful or not, how successful, that is up to God. That is the way we are to approach life. We do what we are supposed to do. We do our bit. We do everything that we physically possibly can. And then we hand over to God and say, now the outcome is up to you. I've done my part. I've given my all. And now whether I'm successful or not, that's not in our hands. That's up to God. And that is why Moshe, time and again, was so successful. He was successful in every way possible as a leader. And yet he was the most modest person possible. Moshe recognized and realized and appreciated his shortcomings, his failings, and yet he never gave up, despite the Jewish people time and again complaining, undermining his authority. Moshe never gave up. And you know why? Because God said those three immortal words. Anochi Yemach, I'll be with you. That's all we need to know that we're not alone, to know that the same way God was with us in the burning bush through our suffering, whatever we are going through, be it COVID, be it anxiety, be it all the challenges that we have in our lives now and throughout our lives, to know that all is that is asked and expected for us is to do the very best we possibly can, and then hand the reins of our destiny over to God, and please God, we will be worthy of great things in the future. Wishing you all a Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much for joining us. We learned this evening, these few minutes that we learned together, 20 minutes, as a source, as a merit for all those that are unwell, in particular those that are unwell in our community, on oxygen and ventilators and all the other things. And please God, everyone with COVID should be healed speedily in our days. Wishing you all well. Shabbat Shalom.